Hello, my name is Owen, and welcome to a quick review of Dan Jones's The Plantagenets. What I want to do is give a brief overview of the book's about, tell you the things that I liked, and tell you the things that I didn't like, jumping straight into it. Plantagenets. I am not entirely sure how to pronounce it, but it is a specific line of royalty in England, and Dan Jones covers what he calls the Plantagenet era of the English monarchy. This is a nonfiction, historical, obviously, book. It takes place over about 250, 300 years of English history, and it is fascinating. Jumping into the things that I like, I really like Dan Jones's writing style. I've said this before in the past channel. The best nonfiction is one that reads like fiction. Like it's a story, and it tells like a journey, and there's like an arc, and a lot of these like deep dives into these specific kings is fascinating. Some of these kings are incredibly interesting. Their lives were literally straight out of a fantasy novel, the stuff that they did and the stuff that they accomplished and how they changed England and its very structure to the core. All extraordinarily interesting stuff, and I found his writing style very approachable. It wasn't too dense or boring, and there wasn't really many parts at all where I felt like it was too slow or anything like that, which is a common complaint with nonfiction. And I've read boring nonfiction. It's definitely out there, and I've read less than stellar medieval history as well. So it's not just like I love that time period and I'm like biased to everything towards it, which I kind of am. But I really, really liked it, and I knew I would like Dan Jones's writing style because even though I didn't like his fiction, the fact that he can tell a fiction story in the Essex Dogs showed me that he at least has a grasp of storytelling and what is important in a story. And in a way, it made me like that book a little bit more, just because like now knowing a little bit more about the king, that would have been Edward III during the time of Essex Dogs, and knowing about his background and his goals and a little bit of his like mindset makes the story more interesting. Makes you kind of want to reread it just to like see like the interactions they have with the king. But I'm not going to, because I didn't think any of the characters were fairly interesting that the book followed. So I don't know. But listen, I even said when I did that review of the book, I think I'll like his nonfiction better, and I absolutely did. Now, for things that I didn't like about this book, because it's not a perfect book, don't get me wrong. It's not the best nonfiction book I've ever read. And I would say the only problem with this book is that it's too big in scope, I guess. Like, I understand that the Plantagenets, if you're going to do a book on them, you got to do, like, from the beginning. He starts around, like, Henry I a little bit, Henry II era, all the way to Richard II, and that's where he kind of ends it there, which I said is like 300-ish years, a little bit less than 300, I believe. But the problem is all the kings in this line were not created equally in terms of how interesting they were and how, not impactful they were, because they all obviously had their own impacts, but obviously there were certain ones that I favored over others and I liked spending more time with, and it's not really how you should approach history, I guess. It's like, oh, well, I'm only telling you about the interesting stuff because it's all important, I guess. I just wish that, like, I guess what I'm saying is I prefer my books to be a little bit more focused, because obviously a lot too, like, there wasn't like a through line or a common theme connecting all of these kings other than the fact that they were part of like this direct line. Which, like, I don't know if that's a real complaint, because like I said, it's nonfiction, and it is this straight line of like father, son, and then like he like ends it by saying like the new king is like not a direct descendant, and that's what leads to like the War of the Roses and like succession wars and like who is the greater claim to the throne, stuff like that. And I understand why it was framed with a specific line. I completely understand that, but I just wish that for a book that, and it's not too terribly short either, it's 600 pages almost on the dot, I wish it maybe would have been a little bit more focused. Like maybe you do like Plantagenets Part 1, and you do like Henry I to John or something like that. You know what I mean? I just felt like some of it was glossed over. Some of the parts of the specific kings were glossed over, and I get it's not that kind of book, but it just felt like, why are we talking about like the fifth king in this line and we focus on some things, but we really gloss over a lot of other things too. And I know there's more interesting stuff there because I've read a specific book about Henry II, and I love that book. That was a fantastic nonfiction book. And that book also has stuff about like Richard, and I read a Crusades book, which had Richard the Lionheart in it as well. And it's all so fascinating that I feel like a book that has to fit all of these kings, and while also telling the stories of like their queens and also like their sons who didn't become king. And it felt too ambitious in a way. Like it couldn't cover all of the details and really paint a very clear picture of who each of these kings were. Because obviously each of these kings can have their own book, and I'm sure they have hundreds of their own books. So an overview isn't necessarily the worst thing in the world, but I don't know. That was just my main thought is I wish we could have got deeper into specific kings rather than trying to fit them all in one book. But then again, I probably wouldn't have read this book if it was 1,800 pages. But I don't know. I guess what I'm saying is I really enjoyed it. I think this is a fascinating period of history, I guess, is to summarize this up. And I wish it would have been a deeper dive, because with Dan Jones's writing style, and I guess that's it. With Dan Jones's writing style, I want an extended stay on very specific periods of history and specific rulers of history instead of this overview, because I feel like it kind of does him a disservice. I feel like he could tell a greater story, a more engaging historical overview of specific kings if he had more time and more page real estate to focus on specific people. I guess that's what I'm saying. But at the end of the day, I did enjoy it, and like I said, many months ago, I bought his War of the Roses book, which was the first book of his that I bought, but yet it will be the third book of his that I read. What's up with that, guys? What's up with that? But I kind of wanted to read in like chronological order, because I think he has this book, and then he has the War of the Roses as well. And I want to read it, and I want to read War of the Roses. And again, it kind of picks up, I guess, where this one left off in terms of like the plot of English history. But overall, I definitely recommend it. Like I said, it was very engaging. He is a great, entertaining nonfiction writer, which is not a small ask, and I really enjoyed it. So I do recommend it if you're a fan of medieval history, if you want to get into medieval history. But I feel like maybe if you're like an expert, there's probably nothing in here that you don't already know, or it doesn't, or kind of just like is an overview rather than like a specific deep dive to any specific king. I don't know. Certainly is very interesting, and there are great like little stories in each of the kings, and those are some of my favorite moments where it's like little anecdotes or specific things that were very important stories of the time, like the Thomas Becket story, stuff like that, which I actually had the opportunity to go to Canterbury and then see where Thomas Becket was murdered, which is a fantastic story if you have no idea what that is. This book covers it, and also The King of the North Wind is the other book, the Henry II book that I read. All fascinating stuff, and I do love this period of history. So I really enjoyed the book. Yep, so I liked it, and I definitely recommend it, and I think you guys should check it out. So be sure to like and subscribe if you liked the video, and comment below other nonfiction recommendations or what you thought of this book as well, what you think of other Dan Jones books. I'd love to hear it. I would absolutely love to hear it. And like I said, more Dan Jones will be coming in the future, for sure. Thanks for sticking around.